Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. House Republicans have released their impeachment report criticizing the process as it enters a new phase this week. The Republican report argues President Trump was acting on reasonable and valid concerns about corruption in Ukraine, not political self-interest, as Democrats are alleging. This report is separate from the one being compiled by House Democrats, which members of Congress will have the chance to view and vote on releasing this week. That vote is part of a busy week in the impeachment process. On Wednesday, a panel of 4 constitutional scholars, 3 chosen by Democrats and 1 chosen by Republicans, will testify on the standards for impeachment. President Trump declined to participate in that hearing, saying it is unfair that it was scheduled while he's in London for a NATO summit.
So the Democrats, the radical left Democrats, the do-nothing Democrats, decided when I'm going to NATO, this was set up a year ago, that when I'm going to NATO, that was the exact time. This is one of the most important journeys that we make as president. And for them to be doing this and saying this and putting an impeachment on the table, which is a hoax to start off with, I think it's going to be a tremendous boon for the Republicans. Republicans have never, ever been so committed as they are right now and so united. So it's really a great thing in some ways, but in other ways, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace for our country.
Anita Kumar and Sheryl Gay Stolberg join me now. Anita covers the White House for Politico, and Sheryl covers Congress for the New York Times. Welcome to both of you. Sheryl, what is the case that House Republicans are trying to make with this report?
I think the case they're trying to make is pretty much the case that they made in the hearings that we saw before the House Intelligence Committee, that the president had valid concerns about Ukraine, that he doesn't like foreign aid anyway and was suspicious of it, that this was a legitimate exercise of presidential power, that in the end, while Democrats are accusing the president of bribery by saying that the president withheld a meeting and also military aid from Ukraine to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, the Republicans will say that in the end, that didn't happen. The aid was eventually released and there was no investigation. And so they will essentially argue that the president was within his rights to behave as he did, that nothing rises to the level of an impeachable offense. And as to obstruction, which the Democrats will charge, that the president obstructed this investigation by withholding documents, they will also say that this is a legitimate right of the president to withhold certain types of information. So basically, they're going to argue that he just did what he was, had the right to do, and that Democrats are overstepping their bounds and trying to overturn the results of an election in which the president was duly put into the Oval Office.
So, Anita, does this report do anything to undermine the Democrats' case for impeachment?
Well, I'm not sure about that, because remember, this is the arguments that we've heard the president and House Republicans make for weeks now. So there's nothing very startling about it. But I think that as a strategy, they wanted to put it out there because obviously they're in the minority. They don't get to run the show here. And they wanted to say what their side of the story was. One of the reasons they're probably doing it as well is because President Trump was frustrated several weeks back that he felt that fellow Republicans on Capitol Hill and elsewhere weren't defending him, weren't putting out a strong enough argument and case on his behalf. And so I think you've seen an uptick in that, on TV, in op-eds, and different things. And I think that's part of this, is that they want to be out there, show their support, say that he didn't do anything wrong as this goes forward.
Well, Anita, this Republican report claims that publicly available evidence shows that Ukrainian government officials sought to influence the 2016 election. And that's a claim that we heard from one of the president's defenders, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, yesterday. Let's listen to that.
No, Russia was very aggressive, and they're much more sophisticated. But the fact that Russia was so aggressive does not exclude the fact that President Poroshenko actively worked for Secretary Clinton. Now, if I'm wrong, and if all these journalists are wrong,
I mean, my goodness, wait a minute, Senator Kennedy, you now have the president of Ukraine saying he actively worked for the Democratic nominee for president. I mean, now come on. I mean, I got to put up, you realize The only other person selling this argument outside the United States is this man, Vladimir Putin. You just accused a former president of Ukraine. You've done exactly what the Russian operation is trying to get American politicians to do. Are you at all concerned that you've been duped?
No.
All right. So, Anita, what do we know about where this claim comes from, or if there is, in fact, any evidence to support it?
Well, we saw the intelligence community talk about, before this impeachment proceeding started, we saw the intelligence community of the United States say that it was Russia that interfered, that it was not Ukraine. During the impeachment hearing so far, we've seen career diplomats saying that it was Russia, and exactly what Chuck Todd just said in that clip there, that this is a Russian strategy. Russia wants the United States to point the finger elsewhere. So, again, I would say that the evidence that the United States intelligence community is showing is that it's Russia, it's not Ukraine, but the president and his allies continue to make this a talking point and will continue to do that so. And one of the reasons they have to do that is this is what President Trump said in the very beginning. The reason that he wanted Ukraine, that he asked Ukraine to get involved, is because he wanted to get this straight. What happened in 2016? That was his original goal here. And so he can't go back now and say that he was mistaken.
Well, Sheryl, we know the White House is declining to participate in Wednesday's impeachment hearing. Help us understand the role a representative for the president would have actually played in these hearings.
So I'm not clear that it was really necessary, frankly, for the White House to participate in Wednesday's hearing. What we're going to hear Wednesday is testimony from 4 constitutional scholars, 3 selected by the Democrats and 1 by the Republicans, about what is an impeachable offense, what rises to the level of impeachment. They're going to talk about sort of the process, and they're going to put it in the terms of the Constitution. So there aren't really factual matters that will be the subject of debate on Wednesday for the president to push back on, or for him to have his lawyers defend against. I think the more interesting thing will be to see whether or not the president's lawyers come forward in the hearings to come. We will see after Wednesday's hearing, either later this week or maybe next, a hearing on the substance of the issue, on the report that the House Intelligence Committee is putting together, gathering the evidence that they intend to present against the president. And there, you would think that the president would want to have his lawyers on hand to cross-examine and to question witnesses. But on the other hand, this president has always said that this is a sham impeachment, it's a hoax, so we might just see from the White House a statement saying we don't want to participate in this. President Trump never fails to surprise, so we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, Anita, so to follow up on Sheryl's point, what does the White House gain by not participating? Sheryl just pointed out that really you're going to be talking about the sort of parameters of impeachable offenses with these constitutional scholars. So the necessity isn't perhaps as evident there as it would be later, but more broadly, when you look at this overall process, but what is there to be gained, Anita, from the White House choosing to sit back and not have its own representative, particularly for those later hearings that Sheryl was talking about?
Well, I'm hearing from a lot of people close to President Trump and close to, his allies talking about 2 things, really. One is they just don't feel that they can change any votes here. This is going to be largely, if not completely, along party lines. They feel like if they go and present any evidence, it really won't change the vote and perhaps won't really matter in the end. And also sort of the broader thing that we've, talked about a little bit, and you've heard the president and the White House talk about, they feel like they have been saying their strategy is to say this is a hoax, it's not legitimate, this process isn't a real process. And so if they do come forward and do participate, they feel like it legitimizes the process, and they don't want to do that. And so you've seen the president tweet about this constantly. You've seen him talk about it with reporters and different venues. But there are a lot of his allies saying to him that it's not a good thing for him to participate formally. It just doesn't bring anything to him, and and there's no benefit to him, and that they should sit it out. I do feel like he wants to a little bit. You can see that he wants to talk about it, but formally they feel like the right way to go is to sit this out.
So, Sheryl, just for some context here, did the White House participate in past impeachment proceedings?
Well, certainly in the Clinton proceeding, the White House did participate, and you will hear Republicans say over and over again that back then they gave the Democrats and President Clinton every opportunity to participate. They were more accommodating in terms of witnesses, in terms of timing. They delayed and waited while the Republicans in the White House gathered their case. So there certainly is precedent for the White House participating in these kinds of hearings. But I think, as Anita said, this White House views this impeachment as kind of a sham and a hoax, and so they probably don't want to legitimize it. And Democrats, I think, feel like there's nothing to be gained by delaying or by waiting or by being overly accommodating, because they see this rolling along on party lines too. So it's almost like we're sort of marching along on two separate tracks. Everybody knows what the outcome is going to be, and it's just a matter of how much time it takes to get there.
Well, Anita, President Trump tweeted that it's, quote, not nice for Democrats to schedule an impeachment hearing while he's out of the country for a NATO summit. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo echoed that sentiment today, saying there is a long-standing tradition of supporting a president while he travels overseas. Can you explain that tradition to us? Has it been upheld in recent years?
Sure, there is a tradition that generally presidents and people don't talk about each other, don't say mean things about each other while the president is overseas. I will say that has sort of gone by the wayside in the last couple years. Not completely. You saw House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying today she didn't really want to talk about impeachment while she was overseas. She's also in Europe for a different event. So, I mean, it has been done. But I would point out that when President Clinton was going through the impeachment in Congress, he was overseas several times, Japan and some other countries where during the process he was not here. And let's be clear, it's not that President Trump or President Clinton is going to show up at the Capitol and defend themselves. They have lots of lawyers and aides that will be doing that for them. Yes, some of them did go overseas with President Trump today to London, but there are many people back at the White House. So they could participate if they wanted to. They're choosing not to, not because of this logistical reason.
So, Sheryl, members of Congress are back after Thanksgiving, but the end of the year recess is not too far away. What does the impeachment timeline look like beyond this week? You touched on some of the other hearings later on this month.
Yeah, so I think, we're not precisely sure because things are moving on such a fast pace, but I would expect there to be more hearings next week before the Judiciary Committee as it debates the substance and works to draft articles of impeachment that will eventually be voted on. Democrats have said that they want a vote on the articles of impeachment by the end of the year, so that means basically by December 20th, because that's the last day before the impeachment break, before the Christmas break, rather. The
right.
Impeachment break, whatever.
Yes, impeachment has clearly taken over Washington, yes.
It's in my mind. And so then we'll see after the break if things go kind of according to the plan that the Democrats have been talking about, we would then see it move to the Senate for a trial. But I would caution you that this timeline is a really fast timeline, and everything is going to have to kind of go just right for Democrats to be able to stick to that timeline. And we really don't know for certain how this is going to play out over the next few weeks, whether we will, in fact, have a vote before Christmas or after Christmas. So stay tuned.
Right, and it's very much an open question whether or not this process will even move opinion one way or the other. Anita Kumar and Sheryl Gay Stolberg, thanks to you both. Really appreciate it.